Hi, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
My name is Tobias Forge. I am the main driving force in a band called Ghost.
With the new song coming out, I think I hear a change in the writing of Skeletá. Tell me about that.
Possibly, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I've tried to create a different record than Impera, and it was meant to be. I mean, one simple fact was that on all the previous records, there has always been a certain degree of instrumental tracks that were purely instrumental. And in this case, it turned out to be 10 vocal tracks. So what I felt I wanted to do in order to make a record that had more flavor and balance was to write certain songs deliberately a little bit more excursive. I don't want to say experimental because it sounds like it's not free form jazz we're talking about, but it's definitely straying from your verse, chorus, solo, chorus.
While Impera was packed full of what I like to call radio hits, the new record seems to be harder music-wise, more difficult to approach. What do you think about that?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, just because you mentioned radio, and I'm obviously talking on the radio right now, so and I must underscore that I grew up with the radio on, so I have nothing against the format. I am also a songwriter, and I'm also very, very interested in the art of writing hit music. So there's nothing bad about that. But for as long as we have, with Ghost, experienced some sort of what you might call mainstream success, where radio has been an element through which greater success could be achieved, it has been a little bit of a question mark exactly what are the elements needed in order to succeed. And I think that the biggest element of surprise was some years ago when I had written a song that, according to the lore, of course, was written 50 years ago, but was a song that I had written and recorded, and I showed it to the label, and I was like, how about that? And they were like, what? It's pretty good. My kid likes it, And they were like, okay, it's a good song, but it's like a B-side. It's not meant for, it was just like a question mark. What do you mean? It's like an old song, right? I was like, it doesn't matter. It's a good song. Okay, regardless, I'm going to play it live. So we started playing that immediately the moment it came out. And I felt like, wow, that's amazing. One of the best songs I've ever written is like just a B-side. Fine.
How did that story come about then?
A few years later, it turned out that was going to be, so far, the biggest song of my career. That turned a lot of heads within the label world because they were like, oh, shit, we didn't know. And what it told me was just like, we have no plan. I have no plan. So I'm not going to chase that. I am going to write songs. I'm going to write the best songs I can ever write, and we'll see what happens with them. Because there's no clear way of telling exactly how it's going to materialize to a song that is worth anything from a hit point of view. And I felt that is not even a bad thing because I'm in a great spot anyway. I can make a record filled with songs that are maybe too hard or maybe too this or too little of that or just thematically sits together. If it's a hit, it will show itself. It will materialize. If it's not a hit, that's fine. We can play the other hits too. We're blessed, for lack of a better, more fitting word, to be able to go out on tour. And we have a lot of fans, and we have a lot of support anyway. And that, to me, actually alleviated me from a little bit of that stress, because I'm like, I'm not going to chase another big hit.
Apart from being harder, I think Skeletá was darker as well.
I don't know. I mean, from a lyrical perspective, where there is a difference between... I mean, all my records have always been, except maybe for the first, but all the ones after has had a certain degree of slight introspective or dubious songs that are of dubious nature. It's supposed to look like it's about this, but it actually means something else. There are certain aspects of that on this record too, but I think it's shooting straighter. And since the overall theme is actually sort of life-affirming, but explained through a death kind of way, signaling that things are amiss currently, but worth sitting through because there are good things in life, it appears darker, I believe.
With Skeletá, there's a new character entering the stage with Ghost. It's called Papa V Perchua. Have you any historical persons in mind while choosing the name?
If you ask me personally, I think that the humoristic element of something that is eternal is that nothing is eternal. So in some parts of the world, they have this sort of eternal leader, which becomes funny when he usually isn't eternal leader anymore, because there comes a new eternal leader. So it becomes a paradoxical thing that signals a short-term solution, if you will. And when you come up with shit as you go, Scientology stuff, these many levels, and then people stick around and they're like, we found out that there are more levels now, so stick around, people. Card, yes, you can pay with card. And because sooner or later that eternity will end. So I personally find it kind of funny with a leader who's perpetual.
I searched around a bit for the keyword Perpetua, and to no real surprise, there was a martyr named in 3rd century AD at Carthage. She was female. So is there even a touch of womanhood in Papa Perchua?
There's always a androgynous touch, but also, yes, I mean, things like that does have a positive connotation. I'm very happy about the will to read and educate that is really thriving amongst our fans. And people tend to, obviously they have picked that up. So there's a tremendous amount of study that goes into most of the things that I do, sometimes beyond really my intention, but I think that that's a good thing. Ghost lives in my head, but it lives in to an even greater extent amongst other people who, where it has a life on its own. So it can be a little bit whatever you want it to be.
Talking about history, most of the song titles are written in Latin. Are you fluent in Latin then?
No, it's the joke, you know. When I write songs and I record them, and at some point, a few people that usually comes in at some point during the process and listens to the songs, and that I like, just to kind of like a screening of a film. You know, you want to see that person's reactions to a song or something. And the joke has been for this one, it's like, is this song called Crying? No, it's called Lacrima. Is this song called Love Rockets? No, it's called Missilia Amori, which means love rockets. Of course, I can't call a song what I'm singing. Satanize being, I guess, one of the exceptions then, spillways. But yeah, I don't know why. I can't just take the easy way out. It would be so much easier to call it just Crying.
So where does your love of Latin come from?
When I grew up as an underground extreme metal fan, you automatically could pass a very simple exam in Latin-oriented words, simply because of English having a sort of a German root and a Latin root. So, just knowing a few Carcass songs and just your overall death metal lingo, you sort of had a little upper hand. If you want to learn Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, you sort of understand quite a lot just because you know your death metal vocabulary. And then obviously the influx of all the sort of biblical elements of watching horror films, but it doesn't really extend farther than that, no.
How long did it take you to write the songs for Skeletá?
I mean, 2 of the songs are as any record that I've ever done, basically, except for the first, but everything is usually spillover. There are always songs written or embryos of songs that have been around for a longer period of time, and this was no exception. I mean, Satanized was in the pile for Impera, so was De Profundis Borealis, and it just didn't make it. So if we put that aside and say that I wrote them into 2020 or something, I was writing for maybe a half a year. But then, of course, the asterisk here is that it's very, very common, at least in my world, that you write a song based on an idea that you might have hummed into your phone 5 years ago. I always have a lot of ideas that I save for later, and little bits and pieces, and very, very rarely do I start with like a completely blank paper.
How many songs has there been to choose from Skeletá?
Around maybe 12, but then they weren't necessarily finished.
10 out of 12, that's a great deal.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it takes, even a song that's intuitively written quickly, if you listen to like the first Guiding Lights, the first like rendition of that, like the first demo after 1 day of demoing, those 2 ideas, the chorus and the piano, that bit are 2 bits that have been around for a longer time, but putting the song together took a day. And that was the basic structure of the song. But then when it comes to the crafting of each and every bit, that always takes more time, regardless of how easy the song is to play.
What's the rough impression of how long you've been in the studio for?
I mean, we started working with the recording in December or something like 2023, I think. That's when it's like, see you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. You do it several days in a row and continue. But then we went into Atlantis, the real studio in, what's that, April, May, something like that. Started recording, but that was like complimentary recording. That's when we started recording everything again and into a old Neve console and with real amps and that stuff. So it's hard to say exactly where a demo is being transformed to a real record or not. And the vocals might be, a verse might be recorded first time I ever sung the word, and then the line after might be the last thing we recorded for the album. So it's really a patchwork of old and new over the course of a year and a half, maybe a year at least.
You're well known as a multi-instrumentalist yourself, so has there been other musicians playing on the new record?
There's been other musicians as well. I mean, the other people that I've worked with, Max, for example, especially Max is a very sort of multi-instrumental guy as well. Frederick from Opus is the absolutely most gifted lead guitar player I know. So what takes me forever to sit in a studio to sort of fiddle with, he can just hear it and just play it much better, and it gives such a more lively and just better vibe to it. I mean, on this record I played most of the rhythm guitars. At some point I played all the bass, and then there's like a patchwork of the bass has been altered with in a digital way, so that my bass lines have sort of been made to sound a certain way. Peacefield is intentionally written as an opening track. I'm always very adamant about opening tracks setting like a tone and being introductory somehow to the rest of the record. Peacefield is a song about hope, which I think is important throughout the record, throughout time, and especially in these times, to have hope about what's going on, and that even though it's dark, there will come a day when it's light again, which has always been the case. So there's nothing unique with the times that we're living through right now.
Was the word peacefield made up by you to be the opposite of battlefield?
Correct. I mean, the name Peacefield, the word Peacefield is one thing. The name Peacefield is of an actual place. It's a house. This has no relations to that, really, other than that I just liked the word Peacefield. And yes, you're correct. In a simplified, very at face value, it's just the opposite of the battlefield. Many pieces have been struck on a field, and right now it's dark on the Peacefield.
How about Lacrim?
It's what I've said throughout the recording a little. What I liked was that it had an Aussie 80s feeling, where kind of like what he sounded like on Bark at the Moon record in terms of darkness, but a similar sunset vibe that he had later on No Rest for the Wicked and No More Tears, obviously a 90s record. And the same way that also King Diamond had that sort of Scandinavian dark occult, but his band looked like a bunch of Sunset Strip dudes, because essentially they ended up being that. So I liked the combo of the dark riffing with this super 80s chorus that I liked. So it's just a combo of two elements that I like a lot from that time.
With Guiding Lights, The Road to Nowhere is Long. That one stuck with me for a while. How did you come up with such an idea?
That specific line it literally came out of nowhere. I was just playing with my, this is what happens often. We have a piano at home in my daughter's room, and sometimes I just sit there and tinker. Many songs have been done on that one, or basics of the song. Satanize was also done there. Because that was also meant like as a waltz. Like you can almost hear it with violins. Do 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 do. And that's how that was written. And Guiding Lights was just that first piano thing. Ding 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 ding. And then I heard that, that's cool. If you play these 4 very, very, very standardized chords over that, it has a moment when it repeats. Do 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 do. That one comes on the third chord, which is like, that's a hook. And the line at that point just came to me. At the road that leads to nowhere, nowhere, nowhere. There you go. That's the hook. There you go. That's a chorus. So that's how it sits with me. That's how I come up with an idea.
De Profundis Borealis.
So De Profundis, I mean, it's a Latin term, but I think it's mostly known from Oscar Wilde's letter, meaning from the depths, or from the abyss, and Borealis, northern. So it means a very immortal, as in the band Immortal, from the northern abyss. And it's is meant to feel like a cold icy storm. And I think it does, to a certain degree. And the vocals are almost chanted by like a group of people. Yeah, it's a song about regret and how to deal with that.
And what about Cenotaph? That means
And the song is it went through a few renditions. The first rendition of the song the arrangement was more complicated and more Queen-like, if you will. And during the recording, I felt that lyrically it was more profound, to the point where musically it was dribbling. It was sort of fooling the listener into thinking that it was a complicated song. So one day in the studio was one of those where I was just like, let's rework the entire song. Let's turn it into basically when Meatloaf is playing his more boogie-woogie songs, let's turn it into that, meet Status Quo, meet CC Top, like a simple, catchy, upbeat song that makes you smile. The original was the same chord progression, same lyrics, same melodies, but it was just arranged in a way more complicated way. It just fell in place with the new arrangement because it was simple, but also had a few elements in there that makes it sort of like, it sounds like it's almost falling apart all the time, because the subject is also like a shaky, it's about the idea that a grave is, of course, different things to different people, but the memory of someone lives inside of you. It's not the buried dust or body or coffin, or you carry that with you, that person.
And what about Miscellia Amore?
It's about the confusion between love and hate, and how the thin line there is sometimes unrecognizable, and the idea of a love missed or not responded to, or a love ended, can trigger hatred. And this might be between two people or two nations. You know, an outbreak nation that wants to be free and is forced upon some gunshot marriage with another nation, saying, we're going to bomb you till you love us. Of course, it has nothing to do with current politics or anything. No.
Tell me about Umbra.
I mean, that song is about lust, and it's a very coital song, because at the end of the day, I think this is an old news, but all you need is love. And I felt that the record needed because it had gone through a lot of heavy subjects, and one of the driving forces that will always be an evergreen subject will always be the pursuit of love, or pursuit of physical human touch. And that's exactly what that song is about. The chase and the consummation of another person in a good way.
For me, the middle part sounded a bit like John Lord and Richie Blackmore of Deep Purple when they did their famous solo battles.
It's supposed to mimic the two partners chasing each other, playing with each other, and then ultimately merging in this bombastic eruption of lust.
Now, if you tell us about Excelsius.
That is the, disguised as a song about death. It's supposed to be a very life-affirming reminder that if you come this far in the book, you're clearly alive. So once you're done with this, you better tend to your garden, because we have shit to do. You have a life to live. Do it now, because you're alive. And that's great.
Well, thank you so much, Tobias.